Black and Mexican political conflict in California. And I felt that this video is extremely important because I've been seeing a lot of nasty videos from Hispanic or Mexican people who've been posting videos, and they'll post videos saying mean things towards black people as if black people are the ones that wanted to create the walling out issue. And I'm going to say that because really the one who is spouting all of that is not a black person, and he is the president-elect. And so that has been everybody's issue, not just a black and Mexican issue. And I want to clarify that, and it's a problem here. It's been a problem. The problems that I remember hearing, even as a younger person, is Mexican or Hispanic or Latin people stealing or poaching jobs away from American citizens. Then I've heard about the baby issue, having lots of babies because the culture has where they don't believe in birth control because of the Catholic religion, or they don't really practice birth control. It's more like the rhythm method, the calendar method, which is not that good. So here you're seeing also the violence in Mexico. And so I've always heard from people who are Mexican saying they want a better life. This is the problem that is happening here in California. And this right here are just a few list of gangs in the Los Angeles County area. And that's not including all of the other states and all of the other areas and cities that have had a gang problem. And gangs are prevalent a lot. And if you go on www.streetgangs.com, it shows Hispanic gangs in Los Angeles County. It says there are about 500 Serrano Hispanic gangs in LA County, representing over 50% of the gang membership. All of the Los Angeles Hispanic gangs along the gangs in the Southern California cities are commonly referred to as Southsiders, and the 13 refers to this geographic identity. Southsiders can be found in Bakersfield to San Diego. So it goes even further on to say that one of the oldest gangs that is Hispanic in LA is called Dogtown Rifa, and it's located in William Mead housing projects, where it was built in 1942, and the gang had been in the area since 1890, when it was multiracial group of Irish immigrants and Mexicans and the other ethnic groups that lived in Chinatown area north of the downtown LA. So what you're seeing is a clip of Tango Negro, the African roots of tango, blacks in Latin America. I thought these clips that you're about to see are showing Afro-Latino, Latin American people, or Afro-Mexican people. And so the reason I thought this was important is to kind of compare the relationship as to, I don't understand why blacks and Hispanic, Latin, Mexican people should be fighting. It should not be fighting between our cultures because we share a whole lot in common. There's more similarities than differences. And if you read about history, you'll read about how slaves were put in most of these Latin countries. There were Spanish conquistador slave traders. There were slave traders. If you even remember that movie Amistad, that's a Spanish slave ship. If you read about history, there were Spaniards that were slave traders as well. So the slaves were put in those countries. So if you're looking at people today, chances are they also have a mix of African blood in them. Somewhere in their family tree, they have a tío that is African descent, or a grandpa, abuelito, abuelita, that is negro descent. So I don't understand where all this crazy fighting comes from. Now, I do understand the political side of it, because people that are here in America will always get in conflicts with people that are not from America over jobs, over money issues. And so I think this is where this is coming from. There is a lot of things that have happened to black people here in America. Lots of history, a lot of bitterness, a lot of brokenness, jobs, opportunities that have not been as readily accessible to people of color. So this might shed some light as to why there's some of this fighting. I think some of it has to do with racism, and some of it has to do with money, classism, and, culture fighting. Just generally, even when you have black foreign people that come to America, sometimes we'll get into culture fights with black Americans over jobs, some of the same issues. So it just doesn't really make any sense to fight against people who are also oppressed. You got two classes or different groups of people, but they've all been oppressed in some way. So it doesn't really make sense to me. I think it's unnecessary fighting, and it's not going to make one be better than the other. And I know even in those countries, I've learned that there's a colorism problem and racism in those countries and outside. Even in other countries that aren't Latin, I'm seeing that there's color issues. Oh, well, I'm lighter, I'm better. Oh, you're darker, you're at the bottom. So this is Afro-Cuban, Yesterday, Today. It says the last rumba of Papa Montero, and it's a filmmaker. So I just wanted you to see that population is very prevalent in those countries. It's just not heard of. And I know there's a couple of people who come from those countries who are black, and they've been talking about and sharing their stories of discrimination issues, or what it's like to live in Mexico, or what it's like to how they treat black people or people of color in Mexico, some of the discriminatory issues. And I really applaud them for that, because it sheds more light on some of the issues that are going on outside of America. But these are girls, young ladies, they're beautiful, and they're Afro-Mexican. And they're proud of being Mexican, and they're proud of having Afro heritage and being of color. I don't see anything wrong with that. But somehow the media will almost always show the lighter skinned people or the whiter skinned people. That's not unfamiliar of what has happened in the US. The same thing happened, I don't know if it stopped during the 50s or the 60s, where almost all the TV characters were white. All the best characters, all the lead characters, all the protagonists of stories were always white, and all the persons that were of color, they looked like they were in blackface, or they were made fun of, or they were in positions of servitude, or they were a criminal, and they all had a negative role in movies and TV and commercials and what have you. So it's the same thing going on that had happened here in the U.S. It's happened in Latin countries, in Mexico, and places like that. So, like, if you get on YouTube and probably some of these other sites and they start talking about politics, people get into real, full-blown verbal fights over stuff like this. And it just doesn't make any sense. And I'm going to read this right here that I was looking at, because if you were looking at the Donald Trump issue, and about illegal immigration, because that's been a big issue right now. You see here, I was looking at something called The Nation, and it's Independent Journal Review. And it says, dad whose son killed by illegal immigrant uses Black Lives Matter phrase like we're not used to hearing, by Joe Perticone. Okay, this was 2 years ago. Jamil Shaw, a man whose teenager son was murdered by an illegal immigrant, testified before Congress on Wednesday. Shaw called the Congress to prevent this tragedy from happening to another family. Shaw said in his emotional testimony, "My son Jamil Andrew Shaw II was murdered by a dreamer, a DACA recipient, a child brought to this country by no fault of his own. Shaw began. My family's peace and freedom was stolen by an illegal alien from Mexico. He was brought here by his illegal alien parents and allowed to grow up as a wild animal. Shaw's son was not killed by a dreamer, though. He was murdered by a man who could have potentially qualified under the Obama administration Deferred Action for childhood arrivals. That's what the DACA program is. Jamil Shaw II was murdered in 2008, several years prior to the adoption and implementation of DACA, or the Dreamer Act. Shaw was attempting to demonstrate the holes in the various immigration policies set forth by Obama administration. He continued on. My son Jamil Shaw II was murdered while walking on his street, 3 houses down from his house. An illegal alien on his first gun charge was visiting a neighbor, and when my son was coming home, he said he shot my son in the stomach and then in the head, killing him. Do black lives really matter, or does it matter only if you are shot by a white person or a white policeman? So it goes on to say that Shaw later revealed that his son's killer was 19-year-old Pedro Espinoza, and he had been released from a local jail just 1 day before he'd executed his 17-year-old boy. Shaw then questioned why a violent illegal alien was allowed to walk free in America instead of being deported. So it has more on that issue. So I'm sure that people have saw that, and they saw that he was protesting and he had voted for Donald Trump. So you have like a lot of Hispanic Mexican people who do not like Donald Trump because of the rhetoric that he spewed and the hateful comments he's made about deportation. So when they see a black person, like one black person, they think all black people are in agreement with everything. And that's not entirely true. There's a lot of political things going on here. Now, I'm going to digress. This woman is Lupita Nyong'o. She's been in a lot of movies. She's very popular, but you almost don't really hear the inside of her story. She was born in Mexico. So her name is Lupita Nyong'o. So she was born in Mexico. I believe that's what I looked up on Wikipedia. And you're going to also see another clip of young black women who are Mexican. They're Afro Latinas. And so the pet peeve I have is that they almost never mention. It's like these people don't exist in those countries. Like they don't have a face or an identity. You always tend to see a lighter or whiter skinned Hispanic people. And so to me, what that spells is racism. That's what it says. So it's no wonder that I'm seeing some of the nasty comments towards black folks as if it's personal. And so some of this is where you get those things where you have a boss that's Mexican, or you have somebody, they take the jobs and then they get in high positions and they only hire people that look lighter or whiter Mexican, or they look white. And they act like they want to be white. So I think that's where some of the conflicts are coming in at as well, because it's like now we're not only having to deal with some of the white racism, now we're dealing with Hispanics who take on the same characteristics as white folks who were here, who were very discriminatory towards blacks. And we're not the ones in power threatening to deport them. So it just doesn't even make any sense. If you remember what I just read, that Obama, he actually made a lot of provisions so that more can be allowed to stay in the sanctuary cities here in America. So, and he's black, but we're still getting discrimination from a group who's treating us as if, as if we're all little Donald Trumps. But now you see pictures of this woman here. She was given a medal from President Obama. It was education 7 years ago which brought an end to school segregation in the entire country. Okay, so it says schools were segregated in Santa Ana, California when Mexican Puerto Rican Sylvia, she had put her story out and aired it, and she was given a medal because if you look at her in that first picture as a little girl, she looked like she has some African descent in her. But as she's older, if people don't know any better, they think, oh, she's just some Mexican lady. But you see the famous Latinas, Shakira and J-Lo and all of them, and Danny Trejo and the Latino guys, our representations are always, they look like lighter skin or whiter, or they have blue eyes, or they look, more like white. They could be white people. And so they're more viewed as being, the dominant culture in the Latin world. So here you have these women, and they look really nice and pleasant, and they're not mean. They don't look like criminals to me. I don't see anything threatening about them. They're not in gangs. They're not trying to. I can understand women like this saying they want a better life. Okay, they're good citizens. They just want to live a happy life. They're not looking to hurt or kill anybody. And so you see a group of people, and they have the flag, and they're prideful. And the problem we also have is if you come from an impoverished country, or you're coming from fleeing violence, and you don't have a lot of money, and you have a religion that says that you shouldn't practice birth control or very little birth control, chances are you're going to have large families. And if you're not able here in America, it seems like everything is always so expensive. And the more things get expensive, the more you can't afford. So you're going to need more public assistance and help. So the other issue that was raised is that having, Latin people, and they have lots of babies. And that is true, and partly because of religion, and beliefs. And so if you have lots of babies, not all those relationships are going to be mother and father. Some of those fathers get deported, or they get in trouble with the law, or something happens, or they leave. And so this woman has all these babies. So what happens to the boys? They end up in gangs. And like what I was telling you, maybe not all the boys end up in gangs, but some of them do. And I'm not saying there aren't other cultures of people that have gangs. And, we've had black gangs, we've had Armenian gangs. Okay, so I'm just naming off gangs in Boyle Heights area of the city of LA. 8th Street, Big Hazard, Boyle Heights. They said that one is inactive. Okay, and they have Breed Street. These are just different gangs. Okay, Clarence Street, they said defunct. Cuatro Flats, East LA Dukes, El Hoyo Soto, Evergreen, Thicket, inactive. Ghetto Style Crew, Crazy A Mexican, called KAM, Little East Side, LES, Michigan Chicano Force, Prima Flats, Opal Street, Centinela Boys. Now, some of these might have some black people in there. I've seen some Latin gangs that have black guys in it. The Mob Crew, Tiny Boys, Barrio Nuevo, Estrada. You can hear some of the names, they're Spanish. Vicky's Town, Wabash, White Fence. And there's white gangs too. We still have the white gangs. There's lots of gangs. There's different types of gangs. But by far and large, we have a lot of Hispanics. 18th Street, Mara Saltrucha, MS-13. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. DSCOcho. Oh, DSCOcho. I had to look at it because I don't have glasses on. DSCOcho and 18th Street again. All right. So we have a large gang issue here, and I'm just naming off some of them. Okay. So in Alhambra, I'm just gonna jot around. In Alhambra, there's two big gangs: Artesia 3 gangs, Azusa 2 gangs, Baldwin Park 2 gangs, Bell in the city of Bell 7 gangs, Bell Garden 5 gangs, Bellflower 2 gangs, big gangs, Burbank 4 gangs, Canyon Country 4 gangs. In Carson, there's 5 gangs: City of Commerce 1 big gang, City of Industry doesn't say anything, Claremont 1 big gang. In Compton, there's 22 gangs in Compton. Cudahy, there's 2 gangs. Culver City, there's 1. Downey, there's 6. In Duarte, there's 1. East LA, unincorporated, doesn't say anything. It's probably got too many gangs. El Monte is 12. So I'm just listening. I'm just running it down. that we have lots of gangs, and a lot of these gangs are Hispanic gangs. Okay, nobody talks about this stuff. In Pasadena, there's 6 gangs. In Inglewood, there's 6 gangs. Hawaiian Gardens, there's 1 gang. Lakewood, 1. Lancaster, 1 gang. Lawndale, 1. And correct me if I'm wrong, those who live in these cities, you probably know there might be more than 1. Long Beach, there's 13 gangs. Los Angeles, 196 gangs. I think that was the most. Out of everybody, all the cities, Los Angeles have 196 gangs. Los Angeles County, 34 gangs. Linwood, 11 gangs. So we have a huge gang issue. And so you seen what I read about the Jamil Shaw incident, about this guy, the dad whose son was killed by what he says is an illegal immigrant, which, correct politically, that's the truth. Okay? So he was one that admittedly said, this black guy, he said his son was murdered, and so he was backing Donald Trump's stance on deportation. Okay? So some of this might be coming from what I just listed out. The gangs issue and the crime. Okay, so here we got a problem here in Mexico where they have a lot of cartels. And you've seen the list of cartels. There's this lots of cartels. I'm just telling you. There's a huge issue with cartels. And I think that might have more to do with where Donald Trump's stance was on the criminal activity. Now that part, I have to be honest, and anybody that is, you don't have to be no rocket science, even Stevie Wonder can see it. That is a problem. It's not even a problem here, it's a problem over there. Now I read an article, I think it was a couple of days ago, saying that they wanted to arm Mexican citizens with guns. Okay, so I'm gonna look that up really quick. And it has something to do with the amendment. Armed and dangerous. Mexicans armed and dangerous. I think it was that article I was looking at. And what is it? It was saying that they wanted them to have guns. Because of the violence that was happening over there. And so it's an unfortunate situation. So I'm realizing now that when people came here saying they wanted a better life, that, okay, here we go right here. Law-abiding Mexicans taking up illegal guns. We're Mexican citizens 100%, and we have the right to bear arms, a reputation of being well armed and not afraid to use their weapons. Finally allowing armed citizens to legally fight back. So I saw this article, and I guess the violence is so rampant there that they're allowing Mexican citizens to have arms. Mexico finally allowing armed citizens to legally fight back, because really that's what they should have been doing all along, if you ask me. If this is your country, and think about it, all these gangs here, why don't you get them gangs? Say, that's it, we're taking back our country, Mexico. We're going to fight all the cartels and fight all of these criminals and get them out of here, because that is the reason why we're going to another place. And now they're giving us a problem, saying that they want us out, but really this is our town, this is our home, and you can't take it from us. So that's my opinion. I'm just thinking they should fight for what is theirs, and Mexico is there. As a result of the continued drug violence in their communities, Mexican citizens have been arming themselves to fight back against ruthless cartels and breaking the law to do so. In Mexico, regular citizens are not allowed to own firearms. When citizen vigilante groups first started arming themselves against the will of the government, police and officials expressed concern and asked the groups to disarm. So it sounds like the government of Mexico over there is corrupt. And I'm just going to say this, it's the same here. American government has corruption. So they're dealing with a similar issue that we've been dealing with here. Same issue that had happened to black people when drugs were put in poor neighborhoods. And there was that plot, the one they talk about, that had to do with the drugs being put in poor neighborhoods to pretty much wipe out black people, poor black neighborhoods. So here you see 90% of the cocaine in the U.S., they say, is from Mexico. And so you just saw where it looked like somebody was getting busted. All right. So when the citizen vigilante group started, they started arming themselves against the will of the government. The police and officials expressed concern and asked the groups to disarm. But now, after armed communities have proven to be an effective force to keep drug cartel activity at bay, the government is changing its tune in some areas of the country. Okay? It's even on CNN, it talks about it here. In a sudden turnaround this week, the Mexican government will provide vigilante groups fighting a drug cartel in the western Mexico a path to become recognized, moving away from the earlier calls for the groups to disarm. Okay, so it goes on. So I'll even say where this article is. It's in the town hall, and it was written by a Katie Pavlich, and it was posted January the 30th, and this was in 2014. So this has been going on for quite a while. And so I've seen countless articles talking about how people are starting to try to fight back. And some people find it that it was too late. They should have done this sooner before it got out of control. But I've also heard that the cartels were coming here to California and that they already are here. Okay, so here's the other issue that's a conflict. Jobs. Immigrants aren't stealing American jobs. More evidence surfaces that low-skilled native workers pursue different jobs than the immigrant counterparts. This is in the Atlantic, okay? A Felipe Diaz Stado poses at his home in Chicago, okay? U.S. illegally. He said he came illegally in 1997 and joined a union while working at a construction site. He says many undocumented people he knows are working for cash at small businesses that aren't unionized because they're afraid to apply at larger job sites that are more likely to verify a worker's immigration status. Okay, and this says right here, further down, the opposite. Economists tend to agree that immigration is a good for their economy. Immigrants create jobs and make U.S.-born workers more prosperous. Okay, that's what they were saying. Now, opponents of this idea often cite that the work of the Harvard Law economist George Borjas to argue that at least low-skilled immigrants steal jobs that low-skilled Americans would normally do. Okay, so that is the conflict. So here you have black people complaining about not getting jobs or not getting hired on jobs. And I've heard in one documentary where one Mexican guy said on purpose they weren't hiring blacks. They were discriminating blacks. And it was a competition for jobs. So here you have, you're going to see stuff with cartels and the violence because they almost always talk about Chicago and black on black crime and black people committing violence and killing one another. Well, you got Hispanic and Latino on Latin crime happening just the same. And if you want to compare the two, we both are in the same boat. So I don't even see why you would be fighting with us over anything. We've had our issues and you guys have your issues the same way. So it's very similar. Here's the drug cartel areas in Mexico. Okay, now I'll compare. I didn't put pictures of some of those other drug kingpins, but in the 70s, they did have black drug kingpins. And out of the 70s and the 80s, and probably the 90s as well, I would assume. But, we've had our issues with drugs, the black community. So I'm not trying to say that we're oppositional of the issues that that Latin culture has experienced. It's very synonymous. So I don't understand what my question is I don't understand why Mexican people feel the need to fight with blacks when you're really basically have a lot of similarities to us in a lot of issues, even politics. The only thing that I can say is different is we were forced, our ancestors were forced to be here, and we were in a forced condition. So we have just as much right to be here than anyone. So it wasn't by choice. We weren't leaving or fleeing a country from violence. We were put over here by hostile takeovers. So there's no way that you can get mad at a people who have so much right to be here than anyone else when we weren't asked to be here, and we were forced to be put in other countries as well. So that is the part that you cannot fight us over, and I will say that right there. Okay, now about the job thing. The core of this argument relies on the assumption that similarly educated native-born immigrant workers of the same age don't take on complementary roles in the job market, as economists suggest, but rather eye the same jobs. But a new analyst of the census data from the Urban Institute finds evidence to the contrary. Okay, it goes on. So I just tell you that this came from the Atlantic, and this article was printed 2015 October 21st by Tanvi Misra in City Lab. So there's a lot of political issues going on here, and now I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I'll be honest and say that I didn't vote for Donald Trump because I felt like he was, there was, from the beginning when his campaign started, it just sounded like a race thing. And it sounded like it was very, very hardcore. Now there were some issues that he was outlining that I could say, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. But he never really said it in a way that it made people feel comfortable as to where his position was. Oh, now everything is coming together slowly, but still, people don't feel comfortable with it. This is a graph of the violence, dating from 2000 all the way to 2011. And that's that same clip of the violence in Mexico. And I've heard friends that I've had that are from Mexico, that said a couple of years back they used to go to Mexico and it was like touristy, Acapulco, places like that. And they've said they can't even go there because of the cartel violence and the shooting. Then I had read an article that teachers in Mexico were being harassed by cartels. They were actually telling teachers that if you don't give them a part of your money, your income, now you're a teacher and that's the money you earn teaching kids in that country, that if you don't give them part of your income, that they would harass them from going to work, that they couldn't even work at the schools. So they were basically trying to take over everything, and that's what happens. Just like, I don't know if you're Hispanic and you're looking at this video, have you ever seen New Jack City? There was a video of a video called New Jack City where you see these black gangs and they take over the Carter building. And so that pretty much is talking about, like Nicky Barnes and those black drug kingpins, how they come into a neighborhood and they take over the whole neighborhood, and it's the black community, and then they try to act like they're all nice, and then they give turkeys away and all that kind of stuff, but it's like they're killing their own people. But then they give back to their people. They think that, the cops won't do anything to me. If I give them turkeys and Christmas gifts, they won't touch me. They even had him in a magazine. He was called Untouchable. And it made police really mad. So they wanted to get rid of him. I think now he's in hiding or like witness protection because everybody folded on one another. So he's sort of like the black El Chapo in the black community, sort of, because you guys have the El Chapo issue. We've had our share of El Chapos, but in the black version. So that's why I don't understand why there's any fighting between our cultures. This is very synonymous. It's in other words, very similar. So it doesn't make sense to fight people who are oppressed when you too are oppressed. That's what I'm saying. You're oppressed by the people who you're trying to be like, but they don't want you to be like them, and they don't want you to be a part of them. And it's bad. And that we've experienced it. We know what this is like. So I just think people need to really read more. Read more.